Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reserve Team Podcast, your home of all things Australian and New Zealand football. My name is Branson Gibson, and I'll be your host this week. And this week, I am joined once again by my good friend Sean. Hello, Sean.
Mate, you nailed it in one. Like, usually we've got 3 or 4 takes for the intro, and you've just absolutely crushed it. Whatever script you put together this week has worked absolutely perfectly, mate. So, yeah.
It's got to a stage where I almost know what I'm doing, so just look out.
Don't jinx it. This will be the week where, like, the audio comes through all shocking or whatever else. I promise not to drink a bottle of wine on your show this week. I think last week it helped the content, but it also didn't really need me at this part of the podcast calling out A-League memes to play friendly matches and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, excited to talk through some football for you and excited to kind of predict the season coming up ahead.
Well, that's it. We have a huge episode ahead of us tonight with the A-League and the W League seasons both fast approaching. We're going to have a little bit of a contest as well, Sean. We'll be making a bunch of predictions about what we think will happen over the course of the season. And then once it's all said and done, we'll come back, have another podcast, have a look at what we said and how many decisions I got right and how many you got wrong, I imagine, is how it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're heading into probably, a 9-month-long off-season, so we're going to have to find some stuff that we come back and talk about while the A-League isn't playing games each and every week. But, yeah, what we haven't decided is how we're going to come up with, rewards or punishments for who actually gets the most stuff correct throughout the course of the season. And neither of us know what the other person has picked. So there is potential that we might double up and both have the same responses on certain things, which is fine. But, yeah, if people have ideas about what they want to see, like punishments or rewards for winners, by all means, let us know in the comment section below. We'll see what we can sort out in probably 6 to 7 months time.
Well, we could just go for the big one. If I win, you shave your beard. If you win, I shave my hair. There we go. That could be it. Then we could just go all in.
Yeah, I don't know which would take longer to grow back, to be completely honest with you, mate. But that's probably a good shout to start with.
Yeah, well, we'll workshop it. I'm not in too much of a hurry to let go of the long locks, but I'll just have to make my predictions good then. Well, let's jump into it, mate.
Yeah, excited to get through, mate. Let's see how we go.
All right, Sean, let's get into it. What we're going to start off with is our team awards for the A-League and W League. So we're going to have a look at premiers, champions, wooden spoons for both leagues. So we'll start off with the premiers. Who is your tip for A-League premiers this season?
So full disclosure, we did a couple of weeks ago our Football Manager season preview, and there was a part of me that was tempted just to throw MacArthur in because we know that Football Manager rates them very highly about what we expect for them for the upcoming season. But kind of looking at all the squads and what squads have kept consistency and different recruitment decisions that they've made, I'm going with Sydney FC again for the premiership. The reason that I've gone for them is that a lot of the chasing pack, and I count kind of City and Melbourne as being a top 2 tier at the moment, and then there's a chasing pack of probably 4 or 5 sides that we don't quite know how they're going to go. They've all got open questions, whether that's a young coach but a very strong squad, whether that's particular holes in their squad, or a young squad that's still learning how to win consecutive football or to win week in, week out. I think Sydney FC have kept most of their core together. I think they've got Steve Corica as a manager who knows how to win each week, and I think a lot of that chasing pack, we know that Paddy Kisnorbo's in his first season as full coach at Melbourne City. We know Richard Garcia at Perth. We know Carl Robinson's going to take time at Western Sydney. I think there's quite a few different sides like that have big questions around their squad. So I've gone with Sydney FC for this because I think their learning curve to win a title is much less steep than everybody else's. I could see them definitely being comfortably difficult to beat throughout the course of the regular season. Does that mean they're the best side and potentially the champions? We'll get to in a moment. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I think week in, week out, I think they're going to be the toughest team to beat during the home and away season. What about you?
Well, so I've gone for a similar school of thought where I think consistency is going to be key here in this year in particular. But my prediction is that Melbourne City will actually finish on top. Again, touching into the same sort of thing, having most of the same squad together, I think that's going to be huge. You mentioned Kisnorbo in his first season. That is a bit of an unknown, but I think he sort of has the perfect resume for stepping up into the role. Having played at City, he's spent so much time there, or his entire coaching career there, with the Youth League, the W League, and then as an assistant with the men's team. He managed a couple of games last year when Mombert didn't go up for lockdown as well. So I think he will transition into the role very nicely. The reason why I've picked Melbourne City over Sydney FC is Jamie McLaren. I think Sydney losing Lafondra in the ACL, we saw Sydney struggle to put the ball in the back of the net. And, full disclosure, the ACL is very different to the A-League, and much, higher caliber defences and teams and everything. So it's hard to compare the two for a like-by-like comparison. But I just think that Jamie McLaren, Golden Boot winner last year, he's going to be hot again this year. I think that'll prove to be the difference for Melbourne City, knowing that they have a consistent goal scorer. So I think that they will be the premiers. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were linked. It was either this week or at the end of last week. They were linked with Bobo again at 37 years of age or whatever he is now, really going back to that kind of old well to try and bring in really that proven goal scorer. I think what we learnt was that Bahaja and Barbarousis, and to an extent the younger players like Wood and Ivanovic and whoever else, they're good, but they're all very in a similar mould. Like Barbarousis and Bahaja are all looking to running behind, and really anything that Bahaja did well was when he was in 1v1 situations in behind goal and using his pace. I don't think they dovetailed as well together as what they would have wanted. And I think there's always going to be that adjustment. There's always going to be that kind of change when you've got a player of the quality of Adam Lafondra and his off-the-ball movement and his finishing ability in and around the 18-yard area. But, I think it wouldn't shock me if they add another piece to their particular puzzle in the next couple of days and weeks before the season starts to really kind of get that last person. And I have a feeling for the whole league itself that we're probably going to see more mid-season signings or early season signings than we have in previous years. Or maybe that's just me being a bit hopeful and hoping that Melbourne City adds a couple of people here and there before the league itself kicks off. But I don't think it's a bad shout by any stretch. I think City are in a good position. I'm hoping, right, that the leap forward to full-time men's senior coaching isn't that big a step for Paddock Kisnorbo, but that's fully acknowledging our obvious Melbourne City bias in that one. We want them to do well as much as possible.
Yeah, I just think Kisnorbo is going to be ready. And just to touch on some of the things you mentioned with Sydney, Bahaja was great, in the ACL, but we saw with Barbarousis, and you mentioned Lafondra's finishing ability, there was just a number of chances that he just couldn't put away, couldn't convert, where you just sort of look at it and you go, well, Lafondra would score those, or he has scored those previously. So I do expect that Sydney FC will bring in a striker, but, once you do, you don't know how that's going to go. It might go well, it might not, it could. So I think there's that element of an unknown, and for such a crucial position, I think it'll be interesting to play out. But I definitely agree with what you said as well, that those two are up the top, and then you have that chasing pack as well. So moving on, rather than going A-League, W-League, I think it might be easier if we just go all through the A-League. So who is your prediction for your A-League champions, your grand final winners?
So this is going to frustrate the shit out of everybody that's listening already very early in the podcast, but I actually went for Melbourne City. This is the challenge, and what I look at is Sydney has the ability to score from other areas of the pitch at the moment. The likes of Caceres, Bratton, Ninkovic, that midfield is kind of working quite well, and they've played together now for 2 or 3 seasons. And I thought last year their midfield gelled very quickly and kind of got it right. Barmihan, it doesn't even need to really start in that midfield team, such as their strength, and Paulo Retre is playing quite a bit as well at the moment. So I think they've got quite a bit of strength there, and I think they're going to have consistent supply, even with that challenge of who's going to be their regular scorer. I could see quite a few different people in that side chipping in with 5-6 goals this season, and them kind of overcoming it through volume scorers rather than one individual putting the ball in the back of the net 22 times. That's, I think, a less bigger jump than Melbourne City's is, where I'm my one concern, and maybe I'm just too burned by past history here, but Kisnorbo will have to learn some lessons, and I'm sure they will drop points throughout the regular season. But when they eventually get into that final structure, I think head to head, Melbourne City arguably have the best 11 available. Having said that, there is a central defensive position that I think both you and I have acknowledged previously on content that now needs to be patched, with Vin Bickler departing and with Delbridge looking unlikely to re-sign. But I think so far in pre-season, they're undefeated. They've beaten quite a few A-League sides, including a very fancied by a lot of people Western United side at largely full strength. And they've beaten Melbourne Victory, and they've beaten a few other sides as well in and around fixtures. I think they drew with Newcastle as their most recent result against an A-League team. So they're doing a pretty aggressive pre-season. They have kept largely the same 11 from last season in the country and available. I do think their marquees aren't as strong. I think Luna, Berenguer, Marquees is the wrong word. Their international visa players aren't as strong as Sydney FC's are, but I think their overall squad depth is much, much stronger. I think there's 2 or 3 people for each position, with that one exception being central defence. So I think head-to-head, if they go into a final series format, they've got the ability, as you've mentioned, with Jamie McLaren to outscore most teams, and I think they've got a fair bit of creative quality across the park to create a few chances. So I think in a tournament-style environment, they would do very well. My honourable mention as well goes to Melbourne Victory, who I think are going to play a very different style this season, given the players that they've brought in. But I think if they eventually, by the end of the season, understand that style and Brebner's still in charge and they haven't thrown the toys out of the pram, I think they could potentially be a tough side to beat, given what we learnt watching them in their pre-season program, the Asian Champions League. They are very much set up this year to be a tournament-based style and a team that's more difficult to break down defensively than they have been perhaps in previous seasons. But intrigued to see what you think. Have you backed the double for this season?
I have not.
Interesting.
I have not. Once again, we have very similar schools of thought here. My prediction for champions, grand final winners, is Sydney FC. And I think the difference will be, for me, and again, Melbourne City fan, I can see them dominating the regular season against lower opposition. They'll play the Jets and they won't drop points. They'll play the Mariners and they won't drop points. Maybe some teams like Adelaide United or Perth, who might not be too flash. I think they'll win those games, and I think that's why they'll finish on top. But what I can see happening come finals time is Sydney's experience, their ability to just win and get results sort of comes into fruition more. In a grand final against, they've all been there before, tried and tested. They've got that experience. Corsica as a manager, he knows he's pretty switched on. So I just think that once you get to that big game situation with the finals, I think Corsica's experience will shine through more so over Kisnorbo. I think you'll find it the regular season easier and the finals tougher. So I think when that happens, that sort of trends towards Sydney. So I think come finals time, they just need to make it. And it doesn't matter if they finish first, second or sixth. They're going to be a huge threat in the finals and no one will want to play them. So I think that they will win the grand final again.
Yeah, so, we probably should apologise to fans at other clubs listening that we're both back Sydney FC and Melbourne City to win stuff again this season after last year, them being towards the top of the division. But I think what you touched upon really important this year is that, the bottom 4 sides in the division, I think, are a lot weaker than perhaps we've seen in the history of the league itself. I think there's really going to be more fixtures this year where you've got a guaranteed 3 points. I know we've and apologies Mariners fans, but a lot of teams look at it as guaranteed 3 points when they play Central Coast at the moment. I think you can kind of throw a few other clubs into that same bucket as being, you're pretty much guaranteed to get something out of those matches throughout the course of this season. So, yeah, I think that's probably going to create a bigger gap between maybe the top 2 and the rest of the chasing pack in the finals than we've seen before. And it wouldn't shock me if we see a very high points total for the top 2 sides that come through this year, just based on the strength of the squads and the strength of their programs continuing on from last season. And we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, one thing that no team will want to win next year is the wooden spoon. What is your prediction for who's going to finish on the bottom?
Oh, I hate to do it to them. It's probably not the one that you expect, actually, but I just can't see Newcastle doing very well this season. They still, at time of recording, and probably tomorrow when the episode actually comes out, we're only 8 days away from the season starting. They still don't have a head coach. They still don't have that many contracted players, as far as they've not announced many people. Their big announcement signings are players re-signing or players departing. We just saw the whole chaos with Bernie Abini, and we're not touching that mental health discussion with a 10-foot pole because we're not experts and we would never try and draw lines in the sand relating to that. We hope that if he does have struggles, he gets the help he needs, and if he doesn't, we hope that his agent and some of the tactics that they are potentially employing also gets addressed by the A-League and the PFA as well. But having said that, they seem to be getting weaker and weaker each week. I think the biggest announcement they've had this week was that Nigel Bugard re-signed a new contract. I thought he already was a contracted player. To have your captain from the last season not contracted going into a new year, I think is very interesting. But I know they've got struggles with player payments and stuff like that. I know they're struggling to find buyers for the club. There was supposed to be a consortium that was going to pick them up and kind of resolve some of these issues. And Arthur Papas has been mooted as a coach to come in, who has a pretty good and strong coaching experience, both as backroom staff and a head coach as well. So I think there is a pathway forward there for them to get it. But I think the longer it takes them to sell this club, the more and more they're going to struggle on the field. And while that will be exciting to give some young players opportunities in that squad, I think it's really going to be a battle for them. I can't see too many players that are really standouts in their squad as things currently stand.
Yeah, and I totally agree, which is why for my prediction, I agree. I picked the Newcastle Jets as well. I just think they are going to struggle mightily. It blows my mind that they're a week away or just over a week away from the season and they don't have a manager. Like, I can't comprehend that, like in particularly in this year when we've talked about how key consistency is going to be. Straight off the bat, you're behind the eight ball, like there's no lead up and we don't know what's been happening behind the scenes, like who's been running trainings and that sort of stuff. Because, obviously someone has.
Yeah, so it's been Craig Deans, who's been a long-time coach there at the club. And I don't know what the scenario is. Like, if he's running it right now, just announce him as the interim manager, announce him as the interim head coach and say, we're still searching for a head coach. Like,
exactly so. Mm-hmm.
If the delay's purely they're trying to do that handover, and I think what's likely to happen and what we're going to see in the next week or so is that the FFA is going to resume control and take the licence away from the Newcastle ownership group. Then maybe they're just waiting for that to actually happen so that Arthur Papas can get announced so that they can make that transition. But like, there's a whole bunch of decisions that they're making at the moment relating to transparency for the season, and like even stuff as small as like their kit reveal, the people that they had there watching, like you and I mentioned this offline, but we saw them have kids come in and pose with the players and they were wearing last year's kit, so like they couldn't even give a small size kit to any of those kids for their own kit reveal on that media opportunity. So like they've obviously got big struggles, they've obviously got big cash flow issues as well, but just like the simplicity of saying that Craig Deans is our manager until a manager is announced, like that would resolve so many of their issues and see what they're working towards. Having said that, they did draw 3-3 with Melbourne City in a friendly on the Hunter Valleys, in the Hunter region. So they, obviously have experienced players in Topor, Stanley, Bugard, whatever else. I just don't see it going well for them. There is always the potential as well, and we should call it out, that the Mariners could be worse than ever before. We never really know what they're going to serve up, but I think they've still got, even though last year's squad wasn't a good squad, they've still kept the vast majority of that squad together, and a lot of those young players will be better for having played quite a few games last season. So yeah.
Well, and they have a manager.
And they have a manager in Alan Stage who knows what he wants and will have had for the first time as the head coach for them a full preseason to work with that group and a full preseason to improve on their poor efforts last year. So I just see the Mariners as being on more of an upward curve, but I don't. It would not shock me if we turn around and see the Mariners at the bottom of the table at the end of the year either.
And that's exactly what I was going to say as well. When you look at the two teams side by side, they're both sort of equally unremarkable or unimpressive, you could say. But I think the Mariners, as you said, I can see them trending in the right direction more so than Newcastle. And I think just all the off-field stuff, like not having received any money from the owners since I think like 2019, they said, like it's just a farce, really. Like it's ridiculous what's going there. So I think that sort of turmoil and uncertainty. And then, as you said, with player wages as well, why would you want to be there? I just think that they are absolutely trending in the wrong direction, whereas the Mariners have more upside to them. But again, I agree. I'm not fully confident in the Central Coast. I just anticipate that the Jets will be worse.
Yeah, and apologies to fans of either of those clubs. It's going to be a long year, but the positive is, if you look at both of their teams, they do have some promising youngsters that if they can get 12 months of football in them, that's going to be absolutely perfect for them. And then, who knows, maybe you've got good assets to build something with the year after or whatever else. But yeah, it's going to be a long year for those guys, I think.
Well, moving on, we're now going to do our predictions for the W League. So straight off the bat, Sean, who is your prediction for W League premiers?
I've gone with Brisbane Roar. So they have probably the most Matildas in their existing structure at the moment, with Tamika Yallop, Emily Gielnik coming back from Germany, and then also Katrina Gorey. I had picked them before even this past week where they announced that Claire Polkinghorne was coming back, who is, one of the better defenders in the Matilda structure and setup. I think they've got a very, very strong, very experienced spine there with, a central defender, 2 midfielders and a forward, albeit a wide player. And I think they've got good pieces around them as well in terms of like Australian youth internationals, promising players coming through. They have the biggest squad, I think, at time of recording of any of the A-League sides. They've made the most signings and a lot of them are from the local Queensland NPL competition. But I think they have by far, even just in those 4 players, they have enough star quality and enough experience in the W League to be head and shoulders above the other teams in the division. And there are some other sides, but very similar to the A-League, I think there's a top-tier talent pool that Brisbane Roar is pulling from. And then I think there's 3 or 4 other sides that are probably going to make up the rest of the finals positions that are, effectively a little bit stronger. Or not a little bit stronger, but strong, but not at that level. I don't think they have the same depth of quality.
Yeah, I agree, but I also disagree because I've got a different premier. I've gone for Melbourne City. Now, that might sound like a bit of a cop-out. 1, because they just won it last year, and 2, because we're both Melbourne City fans. But I just think that the way that whole organisation is set up around their W League team is just so professional and so well run. They're coming off the back of an undefeated season. They have a couple of good signings. Who were they? I literally was just thinking of their names.
Jenna McCormack.
Jenna McCormack. Tegan Micah, when you mentioned Matildas, so they're a couple of new signings as well. With that existing structure and everything that's going on at Melbourne City, Rado Vidicic is the manager as well. I just think that they are very well positioned. And, being so dominant that they have been in W League history, I think it's, hard to see another team surpassing them this year. I think Brisbane will do well. I think Sydney and the Victory will also do well. But I still just think that Melbourne City will finish on top.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a part of me that wants to see them do well. I think our City football program for the women's group has always been very strong. There's been a couple of years where we've been a little bit down, but always in the finals conversation and always in and around that space. The big challenge that they've got this year is that they are, one, by way of being the strongest side last year, the hardest hit by the European departures. They've lost Lydia Williams, Steph Catley, Ellie Carpenter, even some of the long-standing players that had been coming to the club frequently from the US aren't returning just yet. Lauren Barnes has been in that squad since foundation, and she's staying in North America at the moment. And then the big one for me, looking at City squad, is I don't know where the goals are coming from. You mentioned Jenna McCormack. They've got US defender Sam Johnson, who's also very, very strong. They've got good midfielders. We think Yukari Kinga is still coming back. There's a couple of other good midfield players in there as well. But that front line, that kind of front 3 that we would expect them to line up with, I just don't really see where the goals are coming from them. But having said that, it would not shock me, and we've seen this with City over the last few seasons, if they continue to make signings into the season and throughout the season as well. So as football starts to slow down a little bit in North America, as we get towards January and the transfer window start opening up for players in Europe, it wouldn't shock me if more players come back over to kind of complement and complete that City group as well. So while we're talking about it now, a few days out from the season starting, it could be an entirely different conversation in round 1. It could be an entirely different conversation again in round 3. It wouldn't shock me because they have got the space there. I think, I don't think City is a bad shout at all. The interesting one you mentioned is Rado.
I just think it's hard to go past them.
Yeah, the interesting one you mentioned is Rado Vidicic. And this is probably a massive slight on him, and I don't mean for it to be, but they went undefeated in the league last season, Premiership, Championship winning double. But he had the best squad perhaps ever seen in the W League almost, with the strength of the Matildas that were available and the strengths of players that were there. We haven't even spoken about Kai Simon, who's probably one of the most experienced forward players in the W League itself. I don't know, he didn't really have that much to get wrong. There wasn't a huge margin for error in terms of just getting those players out there and letting them do them thing. I'm a huge...
Had a lot of things going for him, you mean?
Yeah.
He won the league undefeated, but realistically that team should have been. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivy Lewick, who I'm a huge rat for, one of, I think, the most underrated Matildas players in the squad at all. Yukari King has won the league with, I think, 3-4 different clubs, and that's not even including the international players that they brought in to kind of complement different stuff. We've seen in the last few seasons a lot of North American talent coming in for the final third, Ashley Hatch, Jasmine Spencer, a few other players as well that have come across throughout that period to be that person in the final third. And it wouldn't shock me to see that happen again. But like the team was so good, all you had to do was roll the dice and see who was going to start each week, and they should be beating most sides in the competition. So yeah, I think City is a decent shout, but they definitely have lost the most, so to speak, from last year.
Yep. Yeah, work to be done. Your prediction for W League champions?
This one was tough. This one was much tougher because I'm trying to apply the same philosophy. I didn't want to get into a habit of saying that everyone's going to win the double. I do still think Brisbane is the strongest side, but I've actually gone with Sydney FC because I think they've got the best young Australian talent. We talked about Brisbane Roar having, those experienced Matildas from front to back all the way through their squad. I think if you look at Sydney FC's, they've got some of the more promising players like under the age of 23 that you'd want to see in your squad, like Princess Abini, Remy Simpson, a few other players in throughout that squad as well, and experienced players in the league like Ellie Brush and players like that. So I think they've got a very, very strong squad, and I could see if they're allowed to play football against experienced sides and they're allowed to exploit space in behind, I can see them being very, very talented this year and causing quite a few sides different problems. Again, similar to what I said with the A-League conversation, I think the experience of certain teams is going to play a huge role in the league this season. I think the experience of Sydney FC on the A-League side will see them win the title. I think the experience of the Brisbane Roar side and the Matildas in that squad will see them be very strong. I just think Sydney FC have the talent and have definitely the potential, but maybe because of that inexperience, because of the habit that is winning, it could be a bit more of a challenge for them. But in a 1v1 knockout competition, I could see Sydney FC doing really well.
Yeah, interesting. My prediction, I have gone for Brisbane to win the grand final. Similar things to what you were saying before, like all the points that you made about them winning the championship, totally agree with. I think they're going to be a super strong side. I just think over the course of the season, I don't know, I just think Melbourne City will be more consistent than Brisbane. But then come finals time, I mean, that squad, I think it's pretty darn good. So I'm picking them to win the grand final.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing for it and the best thing that we've kind of asked for the A-League and the W League is that we're going to learn a tremendous amount this year about who are not the experienced Matildas that we know about, but like how deep does our women's football roster go? How deep does our talent pool go? Because there's going to be so much more time from a playing capacity across the pitch, really, and across all the sides to see who is the next big talent stepping up and who are the Matildas that are going to look at this W League season and say, okay, this is my breakout year to make sure that I'm one of the first names in the squad for 2023. Like, it's a huge building block year for quite a lot of that young talent and quite a few of the players that potentially are in and out of that Matildas frame. Separate to, losing the previous Matildas, there's spots to be taken there for future stars of the competition.
Who are you predicting will finish on the bottom?
Again, this one's tough because I hate to just continue to pile on top of them, but I've gone with Newcastle Jets again. At the moment, I think they've got 6 contracted players for the season, and we are 8 days out from the season actually starting. I don't know if that is because they're waiting for their ownership to get cleared up. I don't know if it's because they don't have capacity to pay them at any point. They have got some good players in there. I think their co-captains are Cassidy Davis and Gemma Simon, who do have relatively strong experience in the league itself. But that's literally it. They don't really have any other players that are capable of pushing on and playing at that high level. And this is a side that finished rock bottom last year and conceded the most goals in the competition last year before they entered this additional challenge and this additional struggle with, players actually signing on and becoming part of the squad. So I just, again, it's the same stuff we spoke about with their men's side. I don't know how you can operate as a full-time professional outfit, or let's say semi-professional outfit almost, because they only play 6 months of the year in the W League. But I don't know how they could be expected to compete with the strength of Brisbane Roar structure and the strength of Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City, Sydney FC, Western Sydney, those sides that have been really putting quite a bit into their women's football programs over the last 12 months. So, I'm sorry, Newcastle fans, this isn't going to be a happy episode for you guys, but I would expect them to be down towards the bottom of the division as well.
Yeah, mate, I absolutely agree as well. They're my prediction to finish on the bottom. They finished bottom last year. I don't see much of a bright future for Newcastle Football Club as a general thing. But what I have got, though, is some breaking reserve team podcast news. You mentioned they've only got 6 contracted players. They've actually got a few more because they've just announced a whole bunch of player signings on Twitter. So I'm taking a look. So they got Gemma Simon, Cassidy Davis, Tara Andrews, Hannah Brewer, Claire Kello in goals, Nicole Simonson, a whole bunch, Lauren Allen, Tessa Tamplin, Gemma House. I'm going to butcher this name. I do apologise. Panayota
Petratos. I don't know if they're...
Panayota Petratos. Thank you. Maybe I should have left the pronunciations up to you. She's re-signed Taryn King, Tiana Yaba, Evelyn Cronus, Sophie Harding, Chloe O'Brien, and Sunny Franco. So those are all live. Some of those were only announced 37 minutes ago, some a little bit more. I've probably butchered a ton of pronunciations because, of course, when we do this on the fly and I don't have time to go look up how to pronounce names, I have butchered them. So I do apologise to everyone who had to listen to me read those names out, and also, of course, to all the players whose name I just tore to shreds. But they have at least announced some more players today.
Yeah,
but having said that, I still think they'll finish bottom.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, that's fantastic. I think this is the first time we've ever done breaking news on any of our shows. So fantastic pickup from you. But yeah, literally 37 minutes ago, they started announcing these players coming through, which I think, just counting them quickly, takes them to a squad of 14 or 15, which isn't massive, but at least it means that they're going to have players out there and ready to go. Not many of those names are jumping out at me as like being not household names as far as the W League is concerned, but, big players. So I think there are quite a few there that are potentially getting their first opportunity from an NPL level. But that's, if they are, and we will, I'm sure, once we're finished recording this, go in and have a look with further detail as to who these players are. If they're getting NPL opportunities or the NPL players getting first team W League opportunities, fantastic. Like, that's probably the best response that we could have seen out of Newcastle. Let's give some of that young and up and coming talent that's only playing at semi-professional structures, let's give them the W League platform and see how they do. That's what we need to be doing more of and seeing more of for the W League as we get into this World Cup cycle. So yeah, credit to them. I'll immediately not retract. I still think they're going to finish bottom, but give them a ton of credit for actually doing the right thing and getting those players signed on.
We have a little bit more confidence in them to field a side now. However, we're not convinced that side is going to be good. I do like this breaking news element to the Reserve Team podcast as well. I just wish I wasn't playing names because I suck at them. I wish it could have been something different. Or maybe I should have handed over to you and go, hey, Sean, can you just read these out? But we move on.
Yeah, well,
this is your prediction.
Before we move on, we should address it because I don't know what these player names are. I just say them confidently, and if I skip syllables or if I get pronunciations wrong, I just barrel on past it, and I will let people in the comment section let me know if I've absolutely butchered it. Or we get Johnny Apotsis, who can pronounce any word under the sun, to jump back in and let us know exactly how to pronounce those names. But yeah, just confidence, mate. Just barrel through it. It's like karaoke or singing. As long as you're confident doing it, no one can really tell if you're terrible.
Yeah, well, I'll keep practicing. I do remember, again, without sort of getting too off topic, I work for Avondale Football Club here in the NPL, and one day I was on the ground announcing and had to read out the team sheet for all the Avondale players, who I know very well, know all their names, and then had to go through the team sheet of Dandenong Thunder, and they had a few very Baltic European names on there, the kind of names that my traditional Tasmanian dad and American mother have not, passed down the ability for me to pronounce such names with ease, and I butchered it. It was terrible. So it's definitely a weak area, but I'll take your attitude of just, sell it.
Just barrel through, do it confidently. The thing that always it makes me do a double take is when it's got the little fathers or umlauts or any of the little accents over any of the letters. Those throw me for a loop every time. So thankfully there weren't any in that list.
The one that I do know is, what is it? Double L in Spanish is pronounced Y.
Yes.
That's the one. That's the one trick I know. That's all I got.
And J is pronounced H if you're in South America. That's the other one, which is why when you see people write instead of ha 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 ha,
Jose.
It's yeah, because that's how they say it. So
and Jose or Jesus.
Yes.
But anyway.
Yeah.
We have now turned into a language phonetic podcast, so we will we will return to football
If,
with predictions for. We're going to predict referee of the year.
Yeah, I know. Well, if Rosetta Stone wants to sponsor us at all, like we're open to any sponsorship opportunities. They can reach out to us at any point. That's absolutely fine.
We could definitely benefit from it.
Yeah, I know. We need to get more kits on the back wall for you. So, like, we've got that budget is blown out for this year. But the one that I'm going to go with, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, is Kate Jasevich, who I've probably absolutely ruined that one. You may remember Kate, she actually refereed last season, the first female A-League referee in a match between Melbourne City and Newcastle, which I think both of us were probably at during that position. She did a fantastic job. She also has, for a long time, refereed the W League Grand Final and been held in very high esteem within the women's game. Fantastic to see her making the jump. I don't think gender shouldn't be an obstacle if you're a good referee and you understand how to let a game flow, and I think she did a great job. Definitely. So I've gone with her, but there are a couple of shout-outs. I think there were a few referees that did quite well in the league last season, particularly in the A-League from the men's competition. I just wanted to make sure that we're getting kind of Kate out there and exposed to the highest level of football possible. I'd love to see her, but one in the W League, I wouldn't want to see referees getting pushed out of that location and out of that pool of talent, but then also like get the A-League experience so that you can be called upon for the upcoming World Cup, and that we can, you know, say that we've got a good base of officials as well throughout that period. But I'll let you go through yours first, and then I'll give my honourable mentions.
Well, my shout was Ali Reza Fagani, the Iranian referee who he's got a fascinating story. Again, I can't remember it off the top of my head, so I won't get too into it in case I get all the facts wrong. But essentially, he just moved to Australia from Iran, wasn't intending to be a referee. And then one day we sort of realised, oh, hey, we've got a former World Cup referee in Australia. We should probably get him to referee a few A-League games. And now he does. And I think he does a very good job of it. Obviously, a wealth of experience on, massive stages, World Cups, Asian Champions Leagues, all of that. I think he's a great referee.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think his first 2 or 3 games in the A-League, this is kind of a complaint now, and I don't want this to be a negative podcast or a negative space, but he was excellent in the first 5 or 6 games, and then it started to get the feeling like he was being coached how to referee by Australian referees. And I think myself and maybe a lot of other people, and I'm happy to defer to any of the more qualified experts in the comment section or on Twitter or whatever else, but it felt like he started to be coached to be another Australian referee. And I think we get frustrated by Australian referees quite a bit in the way that they're, not them individually, but the way that they're coached to manage games. I think the way that he... Initially,
the style, the approach, yeah.
Exactly. And it's a very authoritative approach, and it's a very nip things in the bud early kind of approach. Whereas I think what he did was he let the game flow and he let the game settle into a rhythm, and then he made kind of key decisions based on the flow of the game, which I think is fantastic. Obviously, it's no disrespect at all to the Iranian divisions. They've got very strong national sides, very strong history in football as well. But I think they are they let the game flow a lot more in their organisational structures, and they let the game be a lot more open. And I thought that was fantastic to see those different inputs. You might remember a couple of seasons ago, we did a referee exchange with the J-League, where a couple of J-League referees came across, and that was fascinating as well to see the comparison between their structures where everything was a foul, and basically player-on-player contact was basically only there to have players bring contact and then get a foul, and that they were calling everything, which was crazy to see. And then it's weird to see just those different regional subtleties and regional differences between nations that are all in the same confederation, Japan, Iran and Australia. So yeah, hopefully we see more of that. I would love to see more different referees, even from some of the lower tier nations around Asia, try and give referees exposure if they're from Southeast Asia, places like Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, even India. They're doing fantastic things with the ISL. They're going to try and get more coaches catching up. I think Mark Clattenburg is currently a consultant for the Indian Super League. If he's in the region and we can do something to try and get some of that knowledge base going, absolutely. Let's get more international referees involved in our competition, because we'll learn a lot more. And I think the standard of competition will be elevated quite a bit by getting those different exposures and those different styles.
Yeah, great. Totally agree. I think it's a fantastic concept. What we're going to do now, though, is take a very quick break, and then we're going to jump into our mailbag question. So our mailbag question this week is, who has had the best off-season? A-League and W League, of course. Sean, who do you think's had the best off-season?
MacArthur for the A-League because they had nothing and they've got a very, very good squad on paper. Now, it might not be the best squad overall and it might not be the best 11 overall, but to go from where they were in the current environment, like they wouldn't have known 12 months ago before they'd made player signings at any point where their squad was going to look, and they weren't going to see the absolute shitfest that 2020 has been up to date. But even despite that, they've managed to recruit, I think, intelligently from within the Australian footballing community, the existing A-League market. I think they've recruited intelligently from the NPL competitions with some of the young players we've seen in their trial games. And then at the same time, apologies, sirens are just going behind me there if you can hear those. If you're listening in the car, sirens are on our end, they're not on yours. So I think that was a very good job from them. I think they very early in the piece had the coaching structure in place. Milicic knew what he wanted and they went after that. Sometimes with these expansion sides, you look at the squad, and like Western United is the most recent example. I think their first season, they had about 5 centre-backs and 2 left-backs and then no right-back, or Dillon Piraeus was the one option on that side. They eventually got Josh Risdon in, whatever else. But there are a couple of different things like that where you see, is this being driven by the CEO or the director of football or the coach that hasn't been appointed yet? I think MacArthur did everything in the right order. They have arguably one of the better groups of visa players as well. I think Extraberria, who we'll talk about a little bit further, I think Susueta, I think the other international players they've brought in like Puyo and Derbyshire, they all have proven ability and proven talent. So it'll be very good to see them in the league this season. And I think they've also added quite a bit of young Australian talent that we expect to see getting opportunities, some of which I'll talk about a little bit further as well. But yeah, same question back to you. What are you thinking for the upcoming season?
I totally agree. We're going to be boring and we're going to have the same answer here. I think MacArthur, I think what you sort of touched on there as well with just the strength of their squad. Like you look at it on paper and you go, that is deep, like a lot of, I'm just trying to scroll up and find their squad now. Players like Tommy Orr, Dennis Genre, Adam Federici, Mark Milligan, who else you got? Ivan Franjic. You got Najjar from Melbourne City on loan.
Yeah,
Susaeta and Extraverria, as you said as well. Like you're looking at that and you go, there's some pretty big names. I think they've done a phenomenal job of building a very well-rounded squad. I think they've covered, a lot of areas. They haven't just overloaded in midfielders or defenders. They've sort of got good signings across the board. I think they're going to be a very complete team. It'll be interesting to see how it all works out. Again, harking back to our Football Manager simulation, Football Manager loved them because they look good on paper.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree that they look good on paper, and I think it will translate onto the field. To what level, to what extent, we don't really know. But honestly, on the field, I can't think of many things that would have made MacArthur have a better off-season than what they've had, to be honest. And the big thing as well is, obviously they've had plenty of time to get it right and approach players. So it's almost a little bit unfair comparing it to, other clubs who have only had, 3 months or so to try to go through their off-season. So full disclosure on there, but I still think that they've had an excellent off-season, and I think they're ready to go heading into the campaign.
And I think the fascinating part is that they've also put together, there's quite a few players in that structure that they will be long-term A-League stars if they do well. I think their defensive partnership is likely to be Alexander Susna and Alexander Jovanovic, both of whom are, early to mid-20s, and both of whom are Australian, and both of whom have had exposure at overseas clubs where they've learnt their trade, and now they're coming back to the league where potentially they could put in a good 5-6 seasons as being like an elite central defensive partnership if they get that right. Obviously, Mark Milligan's quite older. He's there to lead the group and, kind of get them up to speed with the standards of the A-League itself, and I think Matt Derbyshire is an older forward that potentially may struggle with the summer competition or may struggle with the pace of the Australian game, given that we are athletically strong but technically poor. But the big...
Franjic and Federici as well, a couple of old heads who've been there, done it all before.
Well, no future spoilers, but he'll come back up again in a moment for me. But I think, they've got a very good mixture of players. I think they'll... I hate to compare the two because, as you mentioned 100% correctly, they've had the advantage that Western United didn't have, where they've had 2 years to plan, not just 12 months. Yeah. But it's a very different strategy. They haven't gone after a big money marquee name to try and capture hearts and minds the way that, the signings of Panagiotis Kone was definitely designed to capture the Greek community, which is a very strong community in Melbourne. Diamante was obviously designed to capture hearts and minds across the division, just with his playing ability on the ball and everything that he's brought for social media since then as well. But I think they've gone a different strategy. Even Berisha to an extent, they knew that he was a known quantity. I think where MacArthur have done it quite differently is they definitely have looked at their squad and said, okay, what have we got, or how do we want to play? What's our structure and shape going to be? Let's get the right pieces to fill that part, and let's get the right pieces to fulfill certain roles in that team. They're not buying 4 defensive midfielders. They're getting like a playmaker, and they're getting a midfield enforcer, and they're getting an off-the-ball worker, and they're getting tricky wingers and playmaking wingers, and they're getting running behind strikers and hold up the ball strikers. Like, they're getting a variety of different types of player, which I think means that they've got a clear path forward. It wouldn't shock me if they made finals this season. But because we do want to acknowledge it as well, I also have to say, like Brisbane Roar, I think their off-season for the W League has been fantastic. I think the players that they've brought back shows that. So Yallop, Gorey, Gielnik, and I've already forgotten her name, which I shouldn't do because she's my favourite player, Claire Polkinghorn. They all have vast experience in the W League, and they all have vast experience at Brisbane. So there's obviously something that's perhaps not going well for the men's side that they're getting very, very right with the W League competition, because all those players want to come back and play for Brisbane week in, week out, and season in, season out. So I think they deserve a huge shout out for their W League recruitment. Of course, this is going to be one of those ones that I think we look back on in 12 months and say, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? Because it may be that Adelaide's got the next crop of like 4 or 5 Matildas that we're going to see in the squad for the next 10 years. It might be that the youngsters, Melbourne City and Melbourne Victory, are going to blood this year, already at an elite W League level. So hindsight is going to burn us on this one, but I've got to give huge credit to Brisbane and what they've done from the W League perspective.
And I totally agree as well. We're totally in sync on this one. For me, MacArthur for the A-League, Brisbane Roar for the W League. The big thing for Brisbane Roar that I think when you look at their off-season, just the way that they have now firmly established themselves as genuine contenders. Like, you look at that squad and you go, yep, they are going to be right in there at the pointy end of the season. Again, without sounding like a broken record, everything that you've covered has been totally accurate. So I just think that the position that they're in, the transition they've made to be able to take that next step up, again, on paper, where you look at it and you go, yep, great off-season.
Is this your plan to try and get around having to shave your head if we just pick the same squads for each of these questions? So we can't both do it.
No, it isn't. It isn't. I can show you my run sheet. I've got everything on here, got these answers in. We did differ on predictions, but mailbag, I think the reason why we've both gone for the same answers is because they're the correct ones, to be honest. Hard to look past them. But what we will do is take a very quick break, and then when we come back, we'll jump into our individual awards. All right, jumping back into things, what we're going to do now is take a look at our individual awards for the upcoming A-League season. We'll start with the A-League first. Again, Sean, A-League Coach of the Year. Who's your prediction to win that?
I've gone with Steve Corica because the reality is I think he should have won it last year. Don't get me wrong, Eric Monbear was great, but I don't think he was the best coach of the A-League season. I think we have this weird thing in Australia, and maybe we'll talk about this further in one of the future awards, where we reward goals too highly. I don't think we've ever had anyone play really outside of the final third that's won a Johnny Warren award, other than it's just strikers and creative midfielders and wingers, and that's it. We don't respect that enough. And same for coaches. Like, I think last year winning the Premiership Championship double deserved more credit and more respect. So potentially this is one that I'm giving out based on retroactive points rather than what I think is actually going to take place this year. My honourable mention, actually I'll let you do yours first, and then I'm going to give my honourable mention as to who I think will be the big surprise.
Yeah, well, just touching on that one, I think a lot of the time with season awards like that, it would be so easy to give the Manager of the Year award, of course, to the manager of the team that finished on top and won the and won the grand final. So I just think that would just be, people would see that almost as a cop-out. So it's like, well, okay, well, let's give it to someone else, So I think that part of the reason why Monbear might have got it, I don't think it was unjustified by any stretch of the imagination that he got it. Leicester City did their best ever finish in 1 year, most points, all that sort of stuff. But I think that might have been a bit of a factor, City have already won 2 trophies, can't go giving them all the awards, which I don't necessarily agree with. But my prediction, so I've got 2. So my prediction for Manager of the Year is Patrick Kisnorbo. And the big part of that is because I'm predicting that City will win the league. If he wins the league in his first season as manager, I can't see how you can give the award to anyone else, if that makes sense, you know. It would be such a huge accomplishment. I think that would be massive. I think he'd win it. Having said that, I'm not entirely confident that City will win the league. I've predicted them to, but I can also see this year going a little bit pear-shaped where maybe they finish third or something and aren't quite as convincing as they were last year. If that's the case, my honourable mention is Grant Brebner for the victory. I think if there was a pre-season Coach of the Year award based on the Champions League, he would win it. I think the Victory have done fairly nicely in the off-season. I think their recent announcements of Gested and Shotton as well really help. So I think that the Victory will rebound. They've never missed the finals in consecutive years, so they're at risk of doing that this season, but I don't think that'll happen. I think they'll finish in the top 6. I think Grant Brenner will do a very good job, and he would be my honourable mention for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I think Kisnorbo is a great shout, firstly, because I think if he wins, not the league, but if he wins the championship, he'll be the first manager to win the Youth League, W League and A-League Grand Finals, which is absolutely ridiculous, given that he is still, in his 30s. He's not quite, an ancient man in terms of coaching years. The other honourable mention that I was going to kind of note was Ante Milicic. I think he's done a very, very long stint as a coach and an assistant manager throughout the A-League. He, of course, played in the league. We've got, I think, 6 coaches in the A-League this season that have played previously in the league, like Warren Moon, like Richard Garcia, like Paddy Kisnorbo, Steve Corica, all those players. And it's fascinating to see.
I think it's more than that. We should
run through it quickly because otherwise people will destroy me in the comment section. So Sydney FC do, Western United do, Melbourne City do, Melbourne Victory do, Wellington do, Adelaide do, Perth do, Brisbane do. Yeah, so it's even more than that. Central Coast don't, Newcastle don't, unless Craig Deans. Did Craig Deans play? He might have. I can't remember. There's heaps of teams in there that actually have representation. So way more than the 6 I said. It's probably more like 8, 9 or 10. But I think,
which is great to see, but carry on.
Yeah, but which is great to see. But I think he also proved himself to be a very adaptable manager throughout that time as well. We won't talk too much about the lesbian mafia and Alan Sachs sacking from the Matildas because it's just one of these fascinating things that there's so much speculation about. But I think Milicic came in, did a fantastic job with a very high-functioning squad, really settled that kind of structure back down a little bit after the chaos, got them back into winning ways. And I think the big thing that came out when he left the job and announced that he was going to still continue on with MacArthur was a variety of different Matildas players calling out about how good that environment became and how good his elite-level coaching skills were. So I think he's one to watch. I don't know if any side is going to be able to come into the league and immediately challenge for a title the way we saw Western Sydney do it during their inauguration. I think the league has grown and evolved a little bit more, but I think MacArthur will make finals, and I think if they do have a good year, that he will be definitely an outside chance to get the Coach of the Year award as well.
Great shout. Moving on, we're going to go A-League Goalkeeper of the Year. I'm going to go first because I have a feeling we're going to have the same answer here, so I'm going to get in early, and I'm going to say Adam Federici is my pick for Goalkeeper of the Year. I think he's had a fantastic career in Europe. I think it's kind of forgotten how good he is because he wasn't necessarily at big-name clubs. He spent a lot of time, I'm pretty sure, in the Championship rather than the Premier League. So, it doesn't necessarily have the glitz and glamour as, someone like a Matt Ryan. And he's almost sort of like the forgotten Aussie goalkeeper. But he's a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to come across here, and I think he's going to do spectacularly well in a very good MacArthur side.
Yeah,
who did you pick?
Yeah, I did. I should probably change it so that we don't answer all the same questions. But I think it's fascinating that you mentioned a minute ago not wanting to give Sydney all the awards, and then Andrew Redmayne was the Goalkeeper of the Year last season, which is mind-boggling to me that he won that award. So anyway, that's fine. That's another conversation for another day. My honourable mention will go to Tom Glover. I think we're at a point now with Lawrence Thomas leaving the league. Philip Curto's still there. Daniel Lopez just left the league. There are probably, this is a harsh way to say it, but probably the weakest stocks for goalkeepers that we've had in the A-League throughout any point in the history of the competition, because there's always 3, 4, 5 good goalkeepers. Some of that is just maturity of the league. A lot of those goalkeepers are starting to retire now. When we spoke about the best keepers that the A-League's ever seen. It was Eugene Galekovic, Michael Theo, Danny Vukovic, all those guys that are getting towards the end of their playing career. So we're starting to see that cycle kind of play through. Matty Ryan that you mentioned, fascinating concept there. I think what's caught Adam Federici and has...
Not getting a lot of playing time at Brighton. Could be coming back.
Graham Potter hates Australians. At some point in his formative years, some Australian has bullied him on a beach somewhere, and he's never forgotten it because he sold Aaron Moy for nothing, and now he's benched Matt Ryan. So he's clearly hating on the Colonies at the moment. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast topic. But I think Federici specifically, he's just unfortunate that he was born when he was. So when he was coming up as a goalkeeper and really getting his first...
era. Yeah.
Exactly. Like he had Mark Schwarzer ahead of him. He was in that same batch as Elsko Kalac. At that point, it was hard to be in the top 3 goalkeepers that Australia had and get into the squads, let alone anything else. And then, obviously, once Schwarzer retired, we immediately started to transition to a long-term goalkeeper like Matt Ryan, who was obviously the most promising, I think, young Australian player we'd had come through in quite a few years. So, he's just unfortunate that that's the way his career played out and the timing just wasn't there for him. But I think, same thing that you've said, his pedigree, the fact that he's kept in the Premier Division, the fact that he's kept at big clubs like Bournemouth, like Stoke, whoever else, I think that's really going to show through. And I think he's going to blow a lot of people's minds in terms of his quality this season. Honourable mention from the playing groups, I hope Tom Glover goes to another level, and I hope selfishly that he does well in winning Melbourne City side and he gets an opportunity to go back to Europe and ply his trade with a club over there. I think he's got huge potential as far as young goalkeepers are concerned.
Yep, and I totally agree as well. I think the main reason why Tom Glover didn't win the award last year was because he was only the first choice goalkeeper for half of it. If he'd continued if that great form that we saw him have when he did get that starting role had been extended to the entire season, had he obviously started, then I think he would have been right up there with Redmayne. Another goalkeeper who I really like, I'd like to see him do well, is Birighitti at Central Coast Mariners. I think he's always had potential, always been very good, but just hasn't necessarily, put it all together for whatever reason. Like everyone sort of touts him and goes, really good keeper, but he just hasn't quite, sort of like Aaron Moy for the Socceroos. It's like he's pretty good at club level. He just doesn't translate for whatever reason. But I like to see him do well. Next award, A-League Golden Boot. Who's your prediction?
We're going to pick the same person again. So
we are. So I'm going to go first again then. Jamie McLaren, what's yours?
He's on another tier to every other forward in the division at the moment. And if you're watching Melbourne City's social media at the moment, I think he's got about 8 goals in 4 preseason friendlies against A-League opposition. Some of them from the penalty spot, we'll acknowledge that, but he looks sharp. I think there was a left-footed chip over a goalkeeper that had come out a couple of weeks ago, and he just looks like a guy who's hell-bent on scoring 30 goals this season and really establishing himself as far as the Socceroos frames is concerned. So, I don't see anyone else in any squad. Tommy Juric is an outside's chance, but he hasn't played that much football in the last 2 years. We don't know if he's coming back. Let's put it this way. Tommy Juric played in the A-League when he was a promising player that had potential that we wanted to see go to Europe and learn to harness that potential. And he hasn't. He's one of the many players who plays 4 or 5 games a season as far as the Australian international players are concerned. It will be very interesting, I think, to see how he hits the ground running this season and how he gets on. I'm also apparently, allegedly, based on my sources, the striker that Brisbane signed from Japan, whose name has completely escaped me, and I'll Google it as soon as you start talking. He's apparently a very, very good finisher. So he's an outside smoky chance to be up and amongst it. I don't see Brisbane creating a lot, but apparently he's in that kind of Lafondra mould where he only needs a half chance to score it. So he's one to keep an eye on.
Is it Masato Kudo?
It's Kudo, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say Oda, but Oda's the one that signed for Perth Glory earlier today. But fantastic to see more Japan internationals in and around the league this season. That's going to be fantastic. So, he's another, I think, honourable mention. But, I just don't see anyone getting anywhere near Jamie McLaren this year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know you mentioned in the pre-season that he scored a lot of penalties. It wouldn't be a podcast without me getting a Fulham reference in. So, as a Fulham fan, I never what's the word? Sorry, as a Fulham fan, I never
take a penalty for granted
scoring a penalty. With the dramas we've had this year, if you can put it in the back of the net, I'm happy. Don't care what it looks like. Just put the ball in the back of the net. He's been able to do that. My dark horse for Golden Boot winner is Rudy Gestede. at the Victory. I think he could be good. A couple of seasons ago, he scored 32 goals in 60-odd appearances at Blackburn. He also came out today and said that he is going to be even better than Ola Toivonen. So he's set the expectations high. He said he's going to be bigger and better than Toivonen. So I think he could be good, So having said that, I don't think he'll be Jamie McLaren good. But, that's my tip for a dark horse Golden Boot winner. The last individual award that we're going to go... Oh, sorry, no, it's not the last individual award, is it? The next individual award we're going to go for is the A-League Young Player of the Year award. And who are you going to go for?
Okay, so I'm going to do my honourable mention first because I would have picked him if certain things hadn't played out different ways, and that's Denny Jonro for Macarthur. I think he was fantastic for the Olyroos in the couple of friendlies we saw for them in their final qualification campaign, and it really looked like he was going to be the main, not the main man, but like he was really going to have the strings, in his control and really pulling the strings is what I'm trying to say for MacArthur's midfield. It's been a long day. But it looks like with some of the signings that they've brought in that they are looking for more depth and they are looking for that person in the centre of the park. So I'm now concerned that he's perhaps not going to be the first name on the team sheet each week, which is a huge shame. I'm a massive rat for him. It's always a good sign when you're disappointed if a player leaves your club, and I was disappointed that he left City. I thought he had a good platform this year to go on a little bit more. The one I'm going to go with, though, is Angus Thurgate from Newcastle Jets. We spoke about Newcastle struggles for the upcoming season and, where potentially their silver lining is. Guys like Johnny Katrumbis, guys like Angus Thurgate, I think are really going to step up and become A-League level talents in addition to some of the other youth players that they've got. I think he was very good in the Olyroos structure as well against Sydney FC. Macarthur looked to be involved and looked to get involved in the games quite a bit for the limited appearances that we saw from him. I'm not quite sure where he's going to play. I thought he was going to play up front because he wore the number 9 on his back and he played up front for a couple of the Olyroos games. It looks like from their pre-season lineups he's been playing in midfield, which is very interesting, either alongside Kantarovski or Ugarkovic. So I kind of think if he's going to get more exposure, I've liked what I've seen from him at the end of last season in that post-lockdown period, and I've also kind of liked what I've seen from him with the Olyroos structure. So if he continues to get a platform to play at that level I think he might be the breakout player that we see in and around the league this season. Yeah,
interesting. I've sort of got 3, so we'll go through them pretty quickly. I think Joel King for Sydney, he is fantastic. I think he will just improve again this year. I think he'll be just sort of showcase why he's such a good player. That's a little bit of a cop-out considering how many games. I think he made 23 appearances last year, so he's already played quite a bit, so you could make the argument that he already has emerged, if we're going to say that. Gianluca Iannucci for the Victory, I think he's going to be very good. And lastly, for the Newcastle Jets, Valentino Ewell. Watched a bunch of him when he was at Bentley in the NPL, and he was fantastic. He was at Western United last year. Didn't really get much of a look in. I don't think he had many minutes. I'm not sure how many appearances he made, but he was part of the squad but never really got much game time. He's gone to Newcastle now, and if he can recreate the form that he had for Bentley, he's going to be fantastic. So I don't know who I would pick out of those 3, but I think those are the 3 sort of names that I look at. And again, they're different to yours, but I think that they will be breakout players.
All good players, all of them good players. I think that Ewell's a fantastic, he's a fascinating one because he's 27, but he just hasn't had his opportunity. Well, so really the chance to break out.
That's again, so we were on the run sheet. It was young player of the year, and then in brackets breakout star. Yeah. So I thought he fit into the breakout star category, and also being an NPL graduate, if you want to call it that, which I've decided I will call it that, an NPL graduate.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fantastic to see him have a big impact.
Yeah, what I was going to say, where my follow-up was, if he was 37, Mark Redan would play him, because Mark Redan's only interested in, 1, stalking Mel McLaughlin, and then 2, playing overage players to make himself feel relevant. But yeah, if he was a bit older, he would have probably gotten into that squad. I think Newcastle, again, similar to Thurgate, going to be the perfect platform to him to go out and get games each week and hopefully develop as a further player. It is an exciting time because each squad, as you kind of click through them, there's 1 or 2 young players that you're like, oh yeah, we might see more of them this year based on what we expect for the league and the overall depth in the division, dropping off quite a bit with those international transfers and moves that we've seen. So yeah, very, very exciting time to have probably 1 or 2 very promising youngsters in every single squad for the first time in quite a while.
Absolutely. Moving on to what is actually our last individual award. Got it right this time. The Johnny Warren Medalist Player of the Year. Who are you picking?
I'm going outside the box. I looked through the squads and I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of known quantities here. And because of the way that the Johnny Warren medal is given out with the different inputs from Fox Sports and whatever else, it always favours international players. That's just the reality of the situation. The year that Aaron Moy not winning it in 2015, 2016 is a joke. Diego Castro won it that year. That's a whole other conversation and a whole other rant that I could go on for 2.5 hours. But I'm going with Benat Exchaberia, and I probably butchered the pronunciation, but Brown, I did it confidently enough that no one will actually be able to tell. I think he's got a tremendous pedigree. I think he's the person that they've brought in, which is why I didn't include Denny Jonro in the previous conversation. I think he will be the playmaker, and you've really kind of just got to go and have a look at what he's done and what he's won in his career, and the fact that at time of recording, I think he's only 32. He could play in the A-League for another 5-6 years if he is of that quality and is of that ilk. So I think the fact that he's going to come into the league in a season where there aren't that many international transfers coming in and there aren't that many big names coming in with the level of experience and pedigree that he's got playing in European competition, playing in La Liga, I think he's on another tier. Like you mentioned, Gestede for Melbourne Victory. Again, probably butchering that pronunciation, but I just flew through it so no one will be able to tell. I think he's a very different player. He's a lower league English player, and I think Grant Brebner's got a lot of work to do to start turning Melbourne Victory into like a... Grant Brebner has a lot of work to do to turn Melbourne Victory into... I'll get Rudy Gestede.
Sorry, yes.
And
sorry, dropped out. My apologies.
All good.
Zoom 2020, guys. NBN, we're getting there.
NBN screws over this channel every single day, but that's fine. The additional portion is that Grant Brebner's got a huge task to turn them from being... Ola Toivonen was a very good technical player. He was better with the ball to his feet. Rudy Gestede is an out-of-the-air target man striker. He's a big bull forward. If you saw during the week, the season launch for the Melbourne sides, he's massive and he looks absolutely miserable. He would be the worst type of player to play against because he just always looks angry at whatever point. So I think Victory have got a big challenge trying to get balls in the air to him. I think that's a big structural change for them. They don't have natural crosses of the ball. Marco Rojas is a good 1v1 area forward, but not a silky technical player. I don't think they've got one in midfield. I think Butterfield's very different. I think McManaman's very different. But I think that will be a challenge to kind of count him out of it. I look at Extraberia as being already prepared and already having played at a much, much higher tier than a lot of the other international signings that have come in for a lot of the other clubs. And I include Melbourne City in that. We haven't signed anyone that has played 300 plus games in La Liga and played in the Europa League final and all that sort of stuff. So I expect big, big things from him.
Yep, I agree. I love how when we're talking about butchering pronunciations as well, we seem to have alternate pronunciations for each of it. So my pick is Extraveria. So I'm not sure which one's correct, but we'll diversify our answers here. So hopefully one of us is kind of close. Right?
We'll just call him Benat for the rest of the year. That's what we're going to go with. That will be perfect.
Yep. Yeah, great. Benat, I think he is. I totally agree. I think he's going to be Player of the Year. I possibly Susayeta, but having seen the way he played for City, he didn't seem to sort of land on his feet. Weird time, different league, all that sort of stuff. Maybe that'll actually help him where he has that little bit of experience of knowing what the A-League's like. But I think Susayeta will also have a big impact. My dark horse is Ulysses Davia for Wellington Phoenix. I think he had a fantastic year last year. I think if he can sort of recreate it and build on it as well, I think he'll be a fantastic player as well. So that's sort of my, we agree, and then a dark horse in there. But what we're going to do now is jump into the Reserve Team Hall of Fame. We're going to take a look at who is entering the hallowed turf. Oh, is it hallowed turf if it's a hall? I like to think that there's turf in our hall, whether it's AstroTurf or artificial or real turf. Anyway, who will enter the hallowed turf of our Hall of Fame? Sean, you've got the results. Talk us through it.
It's a hypothetical hall. It doesn't physically exist, so it can have whatever ground you want. If you want grass, we'll get grass for you, mate. That's absolutely fine.
Hallowed turf seemed like a great adjective, and then as soon as I said it, I'm like, in a hallway? I don't know. But it is football, so it makes sense that it would be there. So Anyway, you got the results. Talk us through them.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that you've thrown to me is because I have to admit for the first time I've been defeated in the Hall of Fame nominations, and I know people everywhere know that I'm the man of the people, and I got close. This is actually last week when we inducted Marvin, you had the biggest winning margin and the most votes for a particular order. This week, it's the closest margin we've ever had. So wasn't that much in it. I wish I maybe had to hit up some of my friends and family to get additional votes in there to get mine over the line, but starting with third position, Taryn's nomination from last week, it was the Elise Keller-Knight, Lisa Devanna water bottle gif. If you haven't seen it, it was on our Twitter. I have taken the tweet down so you guys didn't see the results. We probably will, based on feedback, leave the results up each week so you guys will know in advance who's going in. But a fantastic gif where Lisa Devanna is squeezing a water bottle from the wrong end, and then Keller-Knight grabs it, spins it around, hands it back into her so she can have a drink, which is fantastic.
Seamless save as well. Instantaneous transition. Yep. It's the blink and you miss it, but it's fantastic.
That's that midfield orchestrator that we all wish we were or could play alongside. So that was in third position with 23.7% of the vote. With 35.9% of the vote was my nomination for last week, which is Chloe Lagazzo's Nonna. If you haven't seen those fantastic Optus Sport ads, they're in between different EPL games, different WSL games at the moment. Fantastic to see her background. But the winner with 40.8% of the vote and 100% nomination record for Michelle Morris is Chrissy Memes. Of course, Chrissy, huge part of TLL, huge part of TRT. You'll see more of her on the channel over the next few weeks. One of the most memeable personalities across football Twitter. Even as we jump into this inductee image here, she's just a walking, talking headline, and she's a walking, talking meme. So absolutely fantastic for her. First appearance on the channel as well, just that corner of her hair for our Overlord Valente, so shout out to her also. But I think a worthy winner and the first TRT representative inducted into the Hall of Fame itself, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, and I totally agree as well. Chrissy, as you said, just lends herself to memes. Don't know what it is, don't know if it's something that you have to like practice. I don't know if you have to practice being memeable or if it's just, you know, the life she lives, you know, but it's great that she is in the Hall of Fame where there may or may not be turf. We don't know.
Yeah, she's walking the hallowed turf as we speak.
Yes. So jumping into it now, we're going to throw out. No, we're not going to throw out. We're going to throw in our nominations. We don't want to throw them out. That would just be foolish. We're going to throw in our nominations for the Reserve Team Hall of Fame vote. Sean, who are you going with, mate?
No, I'm letting you go first because I have a feeling. I have a feeling that we're going to nominate the same thing. So I just want to. I'm going to give you the opportunity to go first because I don't want to have any accusations of bias. All right. Maybe this is the week that I'll have to scramble and try and figure something out on the fly. Okay.
Well, this is interesting because I didn't really know who I was going to go for, so now I'm nervous that you might know. But anyway, okay, we'll gloss over that. I'm going back way back to when we started the Reserve Team and we first did this. And my original nomination for the Reserve Team Hall of Fame. So last time I was on, I nominated Marvin, and he won emphatically, and rightfully so. He should have. This nomination as well, I think, should have won in a similar fashion. And I'm sticking with the Central Coast Mariners theme. And I think that the Central Coast Mariners sauce bottle mascots have to go in there. Marvin's got his friends. He plays FIFA with them on Twitter. He needs someone to hang out with in the Hall of Fame. None of the other A-League mascots are going to make it. The tomato sauce bottles are just fantastic. I mean, what a life goal of being, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a tomato sauce mascot. Like, that's just peak, you know, life. And then when we talk about peak A-League, the, the barbecue sauce bottle, giving the finger to travelling Jets fans at an F3 derby game. Iconic. It just ticks all the boxes. It's very Central Coast Mariners. It's very Reserve Team podcast. It's peak A-League. They deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to give our listeners a second chance to get this decision right because I think we got it wrong the first time around and was sort of glossed over. So I've made a more comprehensive and emphatic case for why they should be in there, and I think they will be.
All right, so eventually this Central Coast Mariners meme well that you keep going back to each and every week, that's going to run out. And I know it
never will. It never, mate, the season's about to start. We're going to have 30 weeks of content. Every week there's going to be another Mariners memeable moment here.
Well, Newcastle are the new Central Coast, so like all this stuff is going to change throughout the course of the year.
If just quickly, sorry, if the F3 rivalry translate not to who's better on the field, but who has the most general shithouse moments associated with them. Jeez. Anyway, yes, let's hear yours.
Yeah, so the first one that we're going to throw in is on behalf of the Ladies League themselves. So that's our third option for this week, and that is a recent pilot episode for a show called A Game of Two Halves, which you may have seen flying around soccer Twitter and football media this week, from Kevin Ayres and Simon Hill as the host. Anything with Simon Hill on it is fantastic. But the specific part about that, we're going to shout out and nominate Hayley Routley from the Ladies League and from TRT as well. She does fantastic social media work for us, does a lot of fantastic articles relating to Adelaide, but she actually wrote the funniest parts of that show. So huge shout out to Hayley, and she may potentially be our second internal nomination and internal inductee into the Hall of Fame, but we wanted to give her a shout out, particularly this week on behalf of the Ladies League and everyone with TRT. My one that I'm going for, and apologies because I'm probably going to use profanity in leading this one in, it was just the fuck you nature of the Melbourne A-League press conference. Earlier this week, if you didn't see it, Fox Sports did their own, where they only invited like 4 teams effectively to come and be part of their season launch as our broadcast partner. They stuck Mark Bosnich out on a pontoon in the middle of Darling Harbour and then kicked balls at him for about 20 minutes. He wasn't going to dive because it wasn't the hallowed turf of our Hall of Fame. It was concrete. He definitely wasn't going anywhere.
Or something.
And the players didn't even have boots. Jamie McLaren was firing them in the back of the net barefoot, just wearing socks effectively from the edge of the area, which is crazy. And I think it was just in a random sports bar in the back office there. So like clearly Fox Sports doesn't care at all, but then the A-League itself pulled out helicopters. They pulled out Ferraris. They've got all the Melbourne sides together to do the Melbourne launch this past Friday. So I just really enjoyed that element of it, the fuck you nature of, okay, if you're just going to put us on a back lot at the back of a sports bar in Sydney, we're going to fly in a helicopter. We're going to have, Diamante stepping out of a Ferrari that's peak A-League for me, even more so than Sauce Bottle. So yeah, I just want to nominate that response. One, because of the previous horrible press conference we've seen. I'm not going to turn around and say this was a fantastic press conference in any way, but I just love that we're seeing them splash the cash a little bit. Was that Diamante's car? Did he just rock up late? Was he supposed to be in the helicopter with everyone else? We'll never truly know. We'll never get these answers. But that's my nomination for this week. Yeah, maybe he's afraid of flying. It's weird that he came to Australia in that instance. I'm sure, did he come by boat or something like that? It wouldn't surprise me either.
Well, yeah, maybe. Oh, who knows? Maybe, yeah, got on the plane, zonked out. We're there.
Yeah, just decked out a shipping container and lived in it.
This is going to be a tough one. I think this will be the closest I think it's ever been. We've got 3 very, very good nominations across the board. I will just once again make the case, though. Come on, Sauce Bottles, surely they got to be in there. They lost to David Squires, a worthy opponent. Don't get me wrong, he's fantastic, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But so do the Sauce Bottles, guys. Come on. Well, what is it? The pilot episode? They've not even been around. The Sauce Bottles are experienced veterans of A-League, providing fantastic everything. So I don't even know. I can't even describe them. They're that good. I'm at a loss for words at how impressive the Sauce Bottles are. Vote them in there. Put them in. Those are
the words of a man who desperately wants to go back-to-back in terms of nominations. But, yeah, look, again, there are no bad answers to this particular week in this particular contest.
Definitely not.
And, if I don't start winning again soon, I'm just going to keep nominating the same nomination every week. It's going to get real boring real fast, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. But, yeah, handing back to you to head back into our main content topic.
Yes, absolutely. What we're going to do is jump back into our individual awards, but we're going to take a look at the W League now. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the Coach of the Year for the W League. Who is your nomination, Sean?
I've gone with the weird one. So I've kind of gushed over Brisbane and how strong I think their squad is and how I think that they're probably going to win the league and they'll be very difficult to beat in the finals as well. But I'm actually going to go with Vicky Linton, who's the coach at Canberra United this season. She's previously been a coach at the Matilda structure as an assistant, was also, I think, responsible for back-to-back finals appearances for Melbourne Victory. So she's got quite a bit going for her in terms of the football structures that she puts together. And I think Canberra has always had a very strong football program, and we don't shout them out enough because they perhaps only represent the W League, which is difficult to kind of talk about whole of football when you're just a one division team. Of course, we want them in
as much attention as they deserve.
Exactly. We want them in the A League. Let's be clear on that very quickly. We want to talk about Canberra more and their first ballot A League expansion candidates as far as we're concerned. But I think they have a very, very strong W League program. They're very rarely poor, and I think she's putting together a side that is young but has also got good W League experience, and they've also had a couple of additional US internationals come across. They've kept consistency with their squad last season. I think Canberra is going to be the surprise packet of the W League season, and I think Vicky Linton working in that environment is going to be fantastic. There are a few other shout-outs, like I think there's a few different coaches around the division that are working with young talent that could surprise a lot of people, but I think looking at Canberra's squad and looking at her coaching background and history, she's probably the biggest one for me. And I think the dark horse for the season ahead.
Yeah, great shout. My nomination is Rado Vidicic. And again, this is a little bit of a cop-out, potentially considering that I think City are going to win the league. But I think some of the things that you touched on earlier are why he's going to win Manager of the Year. You mentioned the key departures that City have had, how last year, they finished undefeated, won 11 games. I think they drew one, won the title. And you said you thought that was expected, that he had one of the easiest jobs. I think he's going to win Manager of the Year this time around because City are going to have it much tougher. It's not going to be as easy, but he's going to replicate that success. So I think that sort of the managerial prowess will be more of a focal point, whereas last year, it was just, well, do they even need a manager? Like with the strength of that squad, it didn't really matter who was in charge. They were going to be successful. Whereas I think this time around, we'll sort of see that sort of managerial impact more, and I think City will do well, and I think he'll do well. So he is my tip for Manager of the Year.
If not for any other reason than to prove me wrong, obviously, I'm not
possibly, yes.
I'm not 100%. Like I didn't look at them and think let me put it this way, right? When I watched Melbourne City's Joe Montemuro sides, which was my first real exposure to the W League as a fan.
Yep.
I was blown away by the quality of football that they played. And I don't think we had Paddy Kisnorbo, we had Jess Fishlock as a player coach. They played similar structures to that, and it's been a progression. I haven't seen Vidicic come in as a full-time W League coach and do anything revolutionary. I think he just continued to play the same structure and put the best side out there. I think we had arguably the best.
It's hard to do much more than that, though. Sometimes.
I know. We had the best back four, and we had arguably the two best defensive midfielders in the competition in Yukari Kinga and Ivy Lewick, and we just bossed teams the whole time. All you had to do was put them out there. So, gauntlet's thrown down. If he can prove me wrong and prove that he is a high quality manager and prove that he knows what he's doing to get above expectations, I'll of course be thrilled as a City fan. But yeah, I don't know if I'm 100% sold there. But there are some very, very strong squads and some very good managers in this year.
Yep, definitely agree. Moving along to the next individual award, which is going to be W League Goalkeeper of the Year. I'll go first again this time. I think it'll be Claire Kello. Again, apologies if I have butchered the name there. She's the goalkeeper for Newcastle Jets. We read out in our live breaking news tweets of Newcastle Jets signings. She has indeed re-signed with the Jets. The reason why I think she'll be Goalkeeper of the Year is I believe she led the competition last year with the most number of saves, and we've both predicted the Jets to finish down the bottom. So, it's a little bit of a pessimistic take on things, but I think she's going to have a lot of work. There's a lot of saves that are going to need to be made, if that makes sense. And I think she will. I think she had a fantastic season last year, and she's my pick.
I'm going in a slightly different direction. I have one goalkeeper that I'm going to nominate for a different award. I'm very deliberately, even though it's tempting quite a few different times, to go and pull out different players and give them both awards. Like I think for the A-League, Jamie McLaren may win the Johnny Warren medal, and I think he might be the top scorer at the same time, but I didn't want to nominate twice. And I'm using the same philosophy here. I'm going to nominate this person, but I don't think they're going to win the award. I think they're going to be excellent, and I'm looking forward to see what they do. But there's someone else that I think's better, but I'll get to that in a moment. I'm nominating.
Hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm nominating Gabby Garton, who, if you haven't followed the story, she's an Argentine international who previously played in Argentina for quite a bit. She actually came across to Melbourne to play for State 2 side, Essendon Royals, who have a whole bunch of cash flowing through them at the moment. They've got Vaughan Coveney as their director of football. Archie Thompson's playing there. not heard of Essendon Royals. They're moving up quite quickly and spending quite a bit of money on their football program. So one to keep an eye out if you're an international listener, or sorry, interstate listener as well. But she came across to play for them, and then it just so happened that Melbourne Victory were like, you are way too good to be playing at this level. Please come and play in the W League. And that's how she's made her progression across, which I think is fascinating. I'm very interested to see what she does. If you go through her club history, she's got the pedigree to be very, very good, and potentially be above kind of the level that she's going to be playing at this season. I think Victory have put together the bones of a good squad, but very similar to what you're saying about the Newcastle goalkeeper, I'm kind of thinking mid-table sides that have a good goalkeeper probably see them benefit more and see them become more of a key part of that. So I think because Victory are okay having that strong a goalkeeper, they will probably be pushed higher up the table. Think of like Jamie Young at Brisbane. They're okay, but Jamie Young looks very good because they're not great, so to speak. Whereas, we don't see as much of the likes of Sydney FC, Melbourne City, Brisbane Roar goalkeepers because they don't face that many shots. So it's one of those ones. I was deliberately trying to pick someone out of that middle pack, and I'm very interested to see how Gabby Garton goes this season.
Yeah, and just quickly, it is always hard to pick a goalkeeper of the year winner, when they concede a lot of goals, So, that's always a little bit of a drawback. So I get what you mean with a mid-table team where it's like they've got a good enough team around them to sort of back them up and they can still excel at the position. So I like your school of thought there. W League Golden Boot, who are you picking to win?
Tough one. I think I'm happy to be corrected by all means. W League fans, let me know in the comment section below. Hit me up on Twitter by all means. But I think the central striker position is where the league is currently the weakest. I think we lost Caitlin Ford, we lost Sam Kerr, we've lost a couple of the US imports that played in that position. Obviously, a few of the English imports as well aren't going to be coming back this year with the strength of the WSL. But I've gone with one a little bit out of left field again, and again, it's a Melbourne Victory player. I've gone with Catherine Zimmerman. She's a US international. She's in her early 20s. If you haven't heard of her before, she actually hasn't played at the A-League level up until this year, but she has played 2 seasons with Calder United in the Victorian WNPL competition. In that period, she scored 78 goals in 56 appearances. And if you're not aware, the Victorian WNPL structure is very, very strong. It is arguably the strongest in Australia. And she's done, games where she's carried that side on her back. Calder United, we've spoken about previously, for their new relationship with Western United. They are also one of the powerhouses in the WNPL competition. She's done stuff like scored doubles against South Melbourne in the Community Shield to win that. She has scored over 40 goals in 28 games in her first season in the division itself. Also backed it up the year after, scoring a further 33 goals, and is now getting her first opportunity to jump forward and play at a W League level. I think the fact that there isn't a standout striker and she's got a clear goal scoring pedigree and a goal scoring history in Australia, and she's not coming into a foreign environment, is going to be huge. We spoke about for the A-League, or even for Newcastle with those signings that they made 10 minutes after I said they were going to be terrible, as giving NPL players an opportunity. I'm very excited to see the Melbourne sides doing it. I don't think City does it enough. I don't think Melbourne Victory's done it enough over the last few years. I think she could surprise a lot of people, and a lot of people are going to perhaps get their eyes opened up to how strong the local WNPL competition is. So Catherine Zimmerman is my outside shout to win the Golden Boot this year.
That's a very, very good nomination. Yeah, as you said, Calder United, they are such a strong team. They have dominated women's football in the NPL level in Victoria lately. That's a very good pick. My pick, though, is Remy Simpson from Sydney. She was she was the joint Golden Boot winner last year. I think there were 4 players who each scored 7 goals. She plays for Sydney FC. She is my prediction not only for Golden Boot, but also Young Player of the Year, breakout star. She is only 21 years old, so I think she'll have a phenomenal season at Sydney FC, and she's my pick for both those awards, actually.
So she did win that award at 16 years of age, I think in 2015, 2016, something like that. I'll Google that after this and find out exactly when. So I think the fact that she's still only 21 is mind-boggling, given how long she's been in and around the league. We'll talk about her a little bit further in a moment because she's also one of my nominations in a second. But my young player of the year, and I mentioned this when we were talking about goalkeepers, I think there's a big gap at goalkeeper for those elite level talents like Lydia Williams. We've been spoiled watching her for Melbourne City the last few seasons. She's world class as far as our Australian football representatives are concerned, as far as I'm concerned. Not playing as much as we'd like to see at Arsenal, but that's a conversation that someone else can have with Joe Montemurro. And then at the same time, we've had Mackenzie Arnold also leave. She's playing in Europe. She would have been the clear number 2 behind her in that Matilda structure. Tegan Micah is back in the division with Melbourne City. She was the last third choice in the last squad. And then the one that I'm going to go with is Jada Wyman, who was previously at Western Sydney Wanderers. She's been playing in the league since 16 years of age, which is tough to do as a goalkeeper. You don't often see that for young players in that position. Still only 21. She actually just recently won an award from the Minerva Group, which is part Sydney East or part Sydney Roosters or some NRL thing that's over my head and I don't understand, but won a big scholarship to continue her elite level career. I'm very surprised she's actually not one of the young players that's over in Europe or over in North America at the moment. But I think Jada Wyman making the jump across to Sydney, playing in perhaps a squad that I think is going to be a bit stronger in the division, and still at 21 years of age, I think she's going to really break out to be an elite level goalkeeper in the league. I would have picked her for Golden Boot if I had to pick somebody else for this breakout award, but I think this is really going to be her season to go out and stake her claim as being in that elite tier, which I would include Lydia Williams and I'd include Mackenzie Arnold in as the clear third choice in Australia. And I think she's probably going to be a catalyst for Sydney FC having a very successful season as well.
Yeah, fantastic. The last individual award we have is the Julie Dillon Medalist for Player of the Year. Who's your nomination?
I actually went with Remy Simpson for this one. Again, it's tough because I think she's a shout for Golden Boot. I think she's a shout for Young Player of the Year. And I think she's a shout for Julie Dillon Medalist as well. I think the way that I think the season's going to play out about Brisbane Royals' experience and Sydney FC being the team that tries to keep up with them and maybe does better against them in a final structure, I could definitely see someone like Remy Simpson bursting onto the scene in that respect by dragging Sydney FC through a final series or scoring the goals that eventually win them silverware or win them titles. I think what's also fascinating is that she was front and centre of the Fox Sports media event this season. So obviously Sydney FC are looking at her as being a key part of their structure and their season. I think even despite the fact she's only 21, she's got a huge season and huge expectations ahead of her. And then at the same time, as far as W League coverage is concerned, Foxtel are also probably looking at her quite closely and saying, this is a person that we can build the league around for the next 4 or 5 seasons. Again, like a few of the players we've mentioned, one that I would expect, if they do well, will be the next batch of players heading over to Europe and getting opportunities there. But I've gone with her for Player of the Year. I don't necessarily think she has to score 15 goals or anything crazy like that. I think she could get 6, 7 or 8, but contribute to a Sydney FC side that does well and goes on a good finals run and potentially gets their hands on some silverware. If they do that, she'll be one of the key parts of that squad and key parts of that size.
Yeah. A good nomination. I like how you sort of spaced yours out, and you've really kind of, what would you say? You sort of fine-tuned who you've picked for each award. In the interest of not nominating the same person. I've
done it like a multi-bet, right? So I haven't done any bets that contradict other things, if that makes sense. I think Brisbane are going to win the league, and I think Sydney FC are going to win the final series. So I've kind of gone along with that theme and that structure about if those two teams finish in those positions, who's going to be key and critical for them and who's going to have a good season and effectively be in the conversation for individual awards. This is the football manager mindset coming in, the video game stuff coming back up. This is how I think and this is how I plan ahead of a season.
I like it. Well, I've sort of followed a similar school of thought. Well, actually, maybe it's not similar at all. But my thinking was this is who's going to be one of the best teams and who do I think is going to be one of the best players for one of the best teams. We've both said we think Brisbane Roar are going to be right up there, and I think Tamika Yallop is going to be fantastic for the Roar. So she is my pick for the Julie Dillon Medalist Player of the Year. I just think that whole squad is so strong. I think they're going to have a fantastic season. And, yeah, I think looking at one of the best teams, I've picked who I think is going to be the best player from that team. And, yeah, Tamika Yallop is my selection.
Yeah, a fantastic shout. She didn't quite hit the heights that I think were expected of her at City, but obviously injuries came into it and being in a strong squad came into it as well. But yeah, phenomenal experience in the division. I think just had their first child as well, so congratulations to her this past year. As long as she gets a good night's sleep before games, she will absolutely dominate this league this year. I think... Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, yeah, she did have her first child, and I believe she was meant to go play in Europe as well, in Norway. Let me know if I've got that wrong. But she was meant to go play, but was in New Zealand for the birth of her first child, and then COVID hit and the borders got closed. So that meant that she was unable to travel to Europe, which in a way might be a bit of a blessing, but she was expected to play there, but didn't end up making the trip over.
Hey, what is a downside for her, I'm sure, and getting that extra Euros cash is definitely to the benefit of the W League and to Brisbane Roar as well. So, yeah, I think a fantastic nomination. I think her and Emily Gielnik in particular are probably going to tear some teams aside, particularly in a year when the defences are looking very young. I think I could definitely see her having a field day and destroying the competition this year.
Yeah, well, Sean, that brings us pretty much to the end of our episode. I'll tell you what, I'm excited. The W League, the A League, it's right around the corner. It's really not very far away. Just being able to talk about it and everything has got me excited. Thanks very much for joining us on the Reserve Team podcast to chat about it all, mate.
Anytime, mate. You know I'm always here to talk shit about football, particularly now when we're getting into that build-up to the holiday period and the league starting again. I cannot wait either. So, yeah, exciting times for football fans around the country.
Yeah, I mean, the anticipation is real. Like, it all sort of felt a bit surreal. Like, the A-League's coming up. But now, again, much like Christmas, sort of once you start getting to that week out, you're like, oh, hang on, here we go. It all starts to feel a little bit more real. But thanks again, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Reserve Team podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It does make an impact. Hit us up on any social media, well, not any social media, sorry. Hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can try to hit us up on the other ones. I don't know if you'll get much of a reply, but definitely hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to check out the reserveteam.com.au, your home of all things Australian and New Zealand football. There's a ton of great articles up there, and there's only going to be more interesting discussions as the league approaches and once it starts and the games and the results start rolling in. If you're interested in following me on Twitter, I am at Branson Gibson. Sean, where can people find more of you?
If they want hot takes and tweets that I think are funny but get no likes, they can find at @inthemixer_FM. Of course, links to both your my social media and the reserveteam.com.au down in the description below as well.
Definitely. And if you're into Simpsons memes, you're going to get far more of them from Sean than you are from me. I do not understand them, don't get them, don't rate them at all. So if you're pro Simpsons memes, you're going to get a lot of that from Sean. If you don't get them, much like me, give me a follow and we won't have to endure that, I guess. But thanks, everyone, once again for listening to the Reserve Team podcast.